Hello, my name is Greg Andrus. I'm the Vice President of the Democratic Party of Evanston. This is part of our video interview series with all of the municipal candidates for this upcoming Evanston municipal election. I'm joined today by Judy Fiske, who is the current First Ward Alderwoman who is running for re-election this year. If you are not a member yet of the Democratic Party of Evanston, you can join on our website, evanstondems.com, either as a dues-paying member or if you prefer to get your member as a volunteer. We have a couple of opportunities coming up, a few special elections we can get you involved in, so just reach out and let us know. The ballots for our endorsement session will go out on Sunday, January 17th. They're due back on Saturday, January 23rd. So they start on the 17th and they're due back at 8 p.m. on January 23rd. So Judy, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we just start off and you take the first few minutes and introduce yourself.
Okay, well, thank you, Greg, and hi, everybody. I'm glad we finally got together this afternoon. Obviously, for those who don't know me, I'm Judy Fiske. I'm First Ward Alderman. A little bit about me. My mom was raised in Evanston, my dad in Wilmette, and my family and I have lived on the same block on Sherman Avenue in Northeast Evanston for the past 40 years. For all that time, I've been an active participant in civic affairs and have served the community in many ways, including president of the Preservation League of Evanston, trustee of the Evanston History Center, co-author of the Northeast Evanston Historic District, which is was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and as a local historic district. Associate member of the Evanston Preservation Commission, co-editor of the City of Evanston's Preservation News, treasurer of the Francis Willard Historical Association, founding member of Friends of the Georgian, member of the Kendall College Task Force, appointee to the Police Services Advisory Board, and most significantly, alderman of the First Ward for the past 12 years. So as a nearly lifelong Evanstonian, I've set my foot, it seems, on every square inch of this beautiful city and have observed it closely. You might be interested to know that after college, I worked for a local urban planning firm that was focused on issues relating to zoning development and downtown revitalization. And I've written on and spoken frequently to community groups, statewide organizations, developer, the Evanston City Council, and even for a few wonderful moments in the rotunda of the state capitol building, Barack Obama, and grabbed him to talk about zoning and land use and preservation issues that affect Evanston's downtown and residential neighborhoods. From 1985 to 2005, I was a licensed realtor in Chicago and the North Shore. And from 2005 to 2015, I was co-owner of Fit and Frisky, an independent pet supply business in downtown Evanston that reflected my lifetime commitment to animal welfare, rescue, and adoption. Through this, I learned a lot about entrepreneurship and the joys and challenges of operating a small business in Evanston, which I'm sure we will talk a little bit later about small businesses and the challenges that face them. So all of these activities mean that I've interacted and sought the support of many city councils on the projects I hold dear. So it seemed like a logical next step to share my experience and expertise with the community as an elected official. In 2009, I ran and for the first time was elected First Ward Alderman. And I believe I bring a unique combination of civic knowledge and valuable experience and strong independence to the Evanston City Council. And especially at a time when our nation's politics are divided by what we can only term irrational thinking and angry shouting, I continue to serve the council through what I call a reality-based approach, which is based on accurate information, openness to constituent input, practical compromise, genuine compassion, and what I hope is calm civility. And frankly, I'm a full-time alderman without other work responsibilities that might interfere with my council commitments and constituent contact. For those of you who are not familiar with the ward boundaries, my ward encompasses a good portion of the downtown and part of the university, as well as single and multifamily residential areas. I spend every day working hard on ward and city issues and search for solutions to the many challenges we face as a city. So I think I'm forward-thinking, hardworking, positive, and patient, and especially respected throughout my ward for the responsiveness to the citizens of my ward. Service is not something that I take lightly. I'm bullish on Evanston, And I know that working together, we can come out of this pandemic and the challenges we face stronger together.
All right, thank you very much. So these questions came to us from our members, and quite a few of them had asked what is essentially the same question in this first one. How well do you feel that the city of Evanston is upholding its goal of assessing decisions and policies through a lens of equity?
Well, that's a really good question, and we've spent a lot of time working on this for several years now, and I think we've made a really excellent start on what I consider a vitally important and complex issue, and we're working on this. This is a work in progress, but we're reaching down through the organization from top to bottom to ensure that now and forever, all decisions and policies, whatever they may be, large and small, in our government are viewed through the inequity lens. And the important point is that this work has the attention of everybody in the city. And personally, I'm very proud for the support it's received from not only our employees, but our elected officials and the citizens of Evanston. And frankly, Evanston expects no less.
Thank you. So the next couple of questions we got, and there were quite a few of them submitted, concerned policing. So as an elected official, how do you go about weighing conflicting calls from constituents, some of whom are asking for less of a conventional police presence and some of whom may want more of a conventional police presence?
Well, listening and respecting diverse voices and opinions is what I do. I mean, that's my job. I mean, not only is everybody entitled to his or her own opinion, but the fact that a resident has given time or energy to share their opinion with me means that it's important to him or her, and therefore it's important to me. In the end, it's my job to listen and listen to all voices and ultimately identify a course of action. And in the question of what's the appropriate level of policing in our community, I assume that's something that you would like to know, but I think the council did the right thing to fund a pilot program to study how the use of trained professionals responding to some 911 calls might yield more positive outcomes rather than the traditional police response. So this is one thing that we talk about a lot on the city council and on the human services in which I serve. But it's also another and really important way that residents and the council not only listen together, but work toward a common solution.
So for the constituents who are calling for less of a conventional police presence, what do you do to assure them either that they're not being unfairly policed or that if they are being unfairly policed, in your view, that the police officers responsible are held accountable for that?
Right. So we expect policing in Evanston to be fair and equitable to everyone. I mean, you can't view government through an equity lens without including policing, and anything that deviates from that is entirely unacceptable. So the newly appointed Citizen Police Review Commission is the independent body that was appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council, as you know. In contrast to the previous committee that was appointed by the chief of police. So CPRC was one of the recommendations made by the Blue Ribbon Citizen Police Complaint Committee that was tasked in 2018 to increase public confidence in policing, including an objective review of complaints and a path forward so that police officers and relations between police officers and the citizens are always under review and improvement. So I am confident that CPRC, that's just beginning its work, will be effective in doing that.
So while you bring up the, you're getting a little ahead of me there, but I'll skip ahead to this question then. For the new police oversight board, there have been some people who are saying that it should have, it should be more powerful or elected. Are there any changes that you'd like to see made to that board in that vein?
I think we need to allow the board to start its work and get busy and see how things are going. I think that we have to allow the committee to actually get together and do their work, and then observe and in communication with them, find out from them if they think there are any shortcomings, and also get input from our citizens. I think it's important for everyone to remember that when a board or commission is appointed, there are members who are official members of that board or commission, but all of these meetings are open to the public. And I always encourage everyone to have a virtual seat at the table by attending these meetings and participating in the discussion. It's really important to do because not everyone can actually be on a committee. So taking that opportunity to participate is, I think, very helpful, not only to the committee discussion, but also to us on the council who want as broad a view as possible from the community.
So while we're on the subject of police oversight, FOIAs have become, quite a contentious topic in City Council, especially police FOIAs, which were recently removed from the purview of the city clerk. What do you believe the City Council can do to promote transparency and restore confidence in this process?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think everyone knows that FOIA exists to promote transparency and accountability, and that police FOIAs, however, are a particularly sensitive issue because they may contain personal and private information that should not be shared publicly. Unfortunately, I mean, referring to the instance that happened recently, if the name of a victim of sexual assault was posted online by the clerk's office and was not removed for several days. And that was a huge concern to all of us. What we have been assured of is that the council, that the city is following its rules and following the law. And when questions arise, the staff that now handles, and it's a larger staff than just the clerk, but the staff that handles FOIA will seek the advice of the city's corporation council to ensure compliance, and compliance is the most important thing. And there are options too. For people who disagree with or want to challenge FOIA, they can certainly appeal back to the city or to the Attorney General's office.
So just to go into the specific of the question, would you want to see that return to the clerk's office?
I think it's fine where it is. City Council made, we deliberated a long time about where the appropriate venues for FOIA should be, and that's the determination that we made. We don't want any more mistakes to occur.
Okay. So the next question I had about policing concerns a specific incident where the city of Evanston made use of the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System, or NEPAS, or NIPAS, pronounced a multitude of ways.
Right.
This is referring to the incident on Halloween, which was in your ward. Do you believe the level of oversight that the city has over NEPAS is sufficient, or what would you do to make this relationship more transparent for Evanston residents?
I think that's a really good question, and thank you for bringing that up. So like many residents in my ward, I was shocked, frankly, to see NIPAS officers marching in downtown Evanston on Halloween. I questioned the need to call in additional service, especially when we already have an agreement with the NU Police Department to serve in the areas surrounding campus, which include the downtown. And the optics of that were just not good. I don't think that made anyone feel like we were doing the right thing. So it's obviously a continuing conversation that we need to have. I've asked staff to schedule either at the end of this month or the first week in February, depending on how we can arrange it, for a meeting between the students, staff, the university administration, the police department, and the 3 aldermen whose wards contain many of the students. So I think one thing we need to think about, and I'm not sure what my final opinion on this is going to be, but There's a community ethic here regarding policing. I mean, we really expect our police to know and understand residents in Evanston and understand that we pride ourselves on being a caring community, that our policing needs to reflect that. And I think over many years, that's not only been recognized, but also it's been, the city's been working on that. I mean, we were one of the first cities to have community policing for as a matter of fact. But in this case, I mean, right now, with a larger discussion on policing, I mean, we find ourselves 15 officers short. And I had to say that evening I was wondering, I wish that our officers were out there because they're trained in and understand the Evanston ethic for the most part. And I wish they were out on the street. I think it would have been a much different, certainly the optics would have been different. And I think all of us would have felt better. So again, I would rather use our officers that understand our community values, but again, we need to have a conversation about that. When the chief decides to call in NIPAS, I need to find out. I mean, is that because of what outside information does he have that that we don't have? And you know, when we definitely need advance notice as a council when NIPAS is going to be called so that we can weigh in on that. And the community needs to weigh in on that as well. But I think so. I think there's a bigger discussion here that I'm more than happy to have, but I think it revolves around who we expect to be on our streets. I was shocked again I mean, that an officer would have tape over his badge so that you couldn't FOIA that officer or whatever. It's information we need to have and a full discussion on it. So, but I'm very concerned.
Thank you. So the next few questions, moving away from policing, we got some questions about sort of the city government and the nature of the city government itself. Mm-hmm. Is there anything about the culture of our city government that you would like to see changed?
I guess if I could change anything right now, I would change, I'd like to see less shouting and finger pointing and insults at the microphone at citizen comment and at ward meetings. I think there is this very small group of people who see this as an opportunity to sort of make their points in a way that just does not foster good discussion and actually has driven people away from also participating in government and ward meetings, which is, I think, sad. So I guess, I mean, I understand that Evanston residents are passionate about issues that affect them, but you know, what we're seeing on the national stage and how, you know, extreme expressions can lead to dangerous situations. I mean, we're nowhere near that in Evanston, of course, but I have listened to a couple of the folks at Citizen Comment that wish we had a conversation with them, which we cannot have according to our rules at city council meetings. I think sometimes we haven't done a good job of explaining that city council meetings are actually business meetings, that we have an agenda that we have to pass and bills we have to pay and contracts we have to approve and things like that at city council meetings, rather than it being a discussion. But I think we have to have that discussion. So, I mean, I would be very open to having a series of community conversations, maybe on Saturday morning, that, you know, with folks at just a sit down meeting, a roundtable meeting about, you know, what their concerns are. And I think that would be really helpful. In my ward meetings, we do that. I have quarterly ward meetings and we do that. And one of the, I mean, we haven't been able to do that this year. Obviously, we're Zooming as everyone else is. But at one of the meetings, I actually asked leaders from the faith community and chaplains to come and join us and talk with us about how we might have better conversations as a community. And as that, we had, again, we put our chairs in a circle and we talked about that. And I did that as an experiment, really, to see how the residents of my ward, and I have lots of people at my ward meetings, I mean, there are usually 100 people there, and see how they would react, and everyone loved it. So I think everyone is open to having these conversations, and I find them incredibly useful. So I'm hoping we can, I certainly will talk to my colleagues on the council and see if anyone else is interested in doing that, or I can just do it on Saturday morning myself. But it would be, I think, really useful for the entire council to do that and just set aside a block of time for just an informal citizen comment about anything that citizens want to talk about.
Thank you. And then the next questions we got concerning the city government, they wanted you to comment on the benefits and the challenges of Evanston's home rule status, and find out how you feel about our current council manager form of government.
Okay. Well, home rule. Gosh, home rule. I'm so glad we have home rule in the first place, because I would hate for decisions to be made by the state legislature. So home rule allows us to perform the functions of government, and there are certain limitations. But again, rather than leaving the decisions to the state legislature. And I think about the folks who come again to council and email us and come to our board meetings and talk about issues. And as a former activist, and before I joined the council, I knew how hard it was and how difficult it was when you had an issue that was really important to you to identify that person on the council who would listen to you and who would that you could share information with. And you had to do that ×9 in order to hope to get anything passed. But it's a whole lot easier to do that than it is to go to the Illinois State Legislature and try to convince them of our position. I couldn't even imagine that. So I think that's just not a great idea. I think whatever the concern is behind that is worth talking about. But I'd have to know a little bit more about what that concern was. And the council manager form of government. Okay, so I'm a longtime preservationist. I love Evanston history. I have a library full of Evanston history. I've read a lot about the League of Women Voters in the 1950s, when they really advocated for the council manager form of government. And one of the reasons that they did that was they were really concerned and to find a way to keep big money politics out of our local elections and out of Evanston. So I absolutely value that. I think it's been really, really helpful to have a professional doing the day-to-day, leading the day-to-day operations of our city. I mean, the city council certainly isn't in a position to pick up the garbage or to solve problems of picking up garbage and things like that. We need a leadership in the office of the city manager who can just look at these operations on a day-to-day basis and basically run the city. So then the council can continue to be an oversight to that if necessary. As long as we don't try to micromanage, I think that would be a mistake. So I just can't see in all of the communities that I've observed across the country who have strong mayors that some of them absolutely are not trained to run city operations, so they rely on their staff to do that. I just think it's better to have a professional city manager doing that job.
Thank you. So the next question we got was about the environment, and specifically about the Climate Action Resilience Plan. So we have the goal of a carbon neutral Evanston by 2050.
Right.
What do you see as the biggest challenge we face in reaching that goal? And do you feel that the goal is ambitious enough, or too much of a stretch, or just right?
I don't think it's a stretch. I think it's ambitious, is I guess what I would say. I think it's ambitious, and it ought to be. I mean, it's no good not accepting the challenge and trying really hard to meet it. And I think it's good to kind of have the reviews. I mean, we have a review in 2025 and then 2030 2035 and then to 2050. So I think we've got steps along the way that we can stop and take a look and say, where are we now? I don't want to go back. I don't want to, I want to look at those intermediate steps as a challenge to meet them, rather than oh, we haven't quite gotten there. So I'm really committed to, you know, doing whatever whatever we can. I will say that as far as my ward is concerned, and downtown businesses, we need to do, I think, a little bit better job of keeping in touch with, you know, small businesses and making sure that they understand and bring them along, because some of the changes will require some costs and some, you know, signing in for all of these decisions that are made. I'm sorry, I've had COVID, so I'm doing a little COVID brain fog right now. So I'll be back to normal in a second here. So, I have to say a couple of things that I really like. I was really encouraged to see that one of the focuses was on the urban canopy and green space, because I've spent a lot of time working on that. And personally, again, I have to give a shout out to Natural Habitat Evanston and Citizens Greener Evanston. They established the Fund for Evanston Trees to inoculate our elms, and thank God for them. And Leslie Shadd, a big shout out to her. But they've given me a huge amount of assistance in my work to preserve heritage trees. You may be aware of the stand of old growth oaks at the Kendall College property, and my efforts to rewrite the heritage tree ordinance. And so the urban canopy and green space is just really important to me. So thank you for that, and for all the folks who were involved in that.
Okay. Thank you so much. So the next question is a little bit of just sort of a broad overview on the city budget. Do you feel overall that expenditures by the city of Evanston over the last 4 years have appropriately reflected the priorities, needs, and interests of Evanston's residents?
Well, the budget always is interesting. We always have a huge community conversation about the budget, and it takes a long time. It's a lot of that time is spent listening to residents, and especially during the budget hearings and the ward meetings. And to the best of our ability, we incorporate what the residents say into the final document. And so I guess I'd say yes. I do think. I mean, we work very hard to try to make sure that that the budget reflects the needs of Evanston and its residents. One of the concerns that I have, and if this is an appropriate time to talk about that, I have worked very hard over the past several years to increase revenues, and significantly. And I think we as a council are going to have a very serious conversation about coming out of COVID, applying money to where it's most needed in Evanston. We're going to have to pay up our reserves so that we're meeting our reserves, so that we're not overpaying on interest payments to bond on our general obligation bonds. So I really feel that I have made a significant contribution to the conversation, but I think we as a council are going to have to really look at revenues this year, so that we're not overburdening the taxpayers of Evanston. I mean, even though the Evanston budget is only 18% of your tax bill, it still is incumbent on us to do whatever we can to keep the tax burden as low as we can, and I think we can do that. I need a little bit more participation from the other folks on the council, but I'll keep working on it.
So the next question, it's one that I have been asking all of the candidates, but this one is concerns your ward. Even before the pandemic, it seemed as though downtown Evanston was full of empty storefronts, and of course the pandemic has just exacerbated this. What do you believe can be done to promote development in a way that prioritizes small businesses and local ownership?
Okay, I kind of thought we'd get back to the small business conversation here. So I was a small business owner in downtown Evanston. I know all the other small business owners in downtown Evanston. I know what their challenges are and know what their concerns are. I mean, downtown Evanston is a really interesting place because part of the charm of downtown Evanston is that we have these wonderful little storefronts for niche retail, and it is really hard for you to start a niche retail business. I mean, most folks who start those businesses do so with their own personal funds. They put their savings and lives on the line in order to open these businesses, and they're absolutely committed to the spirit of entrepreneurship that we all think is wonderful. But the challenges are huge for them, and I think in some ways, well, let me just say one thing about downtown Evanston. A lot of our vintage niche retail spaces are roughly 2,500 square feet. They just don't work for larger, especially national retailers that might want to come in. We were lucky with CVS, I mean Barnes and Noble, that space was built for Barnes and Noble, and now they're gone. Whole Foods is another example of a space and that was built specifically for Whole Foods, but you know, now the corporate image of the store is much more akin to the one on Green Bay Road than it is to the what's now a little urban store on Chicago Avenue. So we've got kind of a unique challenge, but a couple of years ago, I joined with a couple of other aldermen. I said, please, I'd like you to come with me. I want to talk to various members of the community, including rental agents and developers and architects and the community. And we just need to talk about downtown Evanston. And I think as a result of that, not only do you understand the challenges, but also you understand the huge enthusiasm there is out there in the market for downtown Evanston. And the kind of, and I won't use the word quaint because we're not quaint, but it's just a very special place that we need to respect and hold on to because it's a benefit to us. Now, I guess I'm not as glass half full, or glass half empty, I'm sorry, as you know, some folks are about downtown Evanston, because I'm the first Ward Alderman, and I know, for example, there are a number of developments that are going to, and changes that are going to come into downtown that I think will be really helpful. But I am very strict about what I think is appropriate for downtown. There's rarely been a building that I've thought was a good fit for downtown. The exception to that was the office building that we talked about in the first ward that was proposed for the library parking lot, which would have been a beautiful architect design office building that would have respected our historic architecture, the Carlson building, the Orrington Hotel, Marshall Fields, building on the fabric of downtown that makes us all appreciate the sense of place that's there and really says Evanston. And that's what I'm looking for. So I've not been very supportive of the new glass tower buildings because I just don't think they're appropriate for the downtown. Now, the difference in that is that does not always make developers happy. And I will point to one success of where stubbornness really paid off, and that was with the Hyatt Extended Stay Hotel. And that hotel, that property, you may remember, was a low single-story commercial building. It had a restaurant. Tally Ho, I think, was the restaurant in there for many years. But anyway, it was Heil & Heil Insurance Agency, and the folks that own Heil & Heil owned that property, and they were looking to sell and develop the property. And they originally proposed an over 20-story building for the site, which would have been totally inappropriate. And That didn't pass, fortunately, because they also wanted vacation of an alley, and that was before I was on the council. So when I arrived, I said to the residents there, I said, this is my position, is that there needs to be something on the east side of Chicago Avenue in the transitional zone of downtown Evanston that really reflects the character of the downtown, and rather than sticking out like a sore thumb. And so for 3 years, we worked on that. My hope was for a small boutique office building. That didn't happen. The next best thing was the extended stay hotel. And that is a building that was built by right under zoning. And that is not easy to do. So I am very proud of that. And again, I mean, the neighbors were absolutely involved in that. You know, we talked about what was the best thing. We talked about that there's going to be something on the site. You can't always say no. There's going to be something on the site, and what's the best thing for everyone. And that was a really good example of something that worked. But there's good stuff happening. Again, shout out to downtown Evanston, Annie Coakley, oh my gosh, and the Evanston Chamber of Commerce, and Lend at Northwestern. I mean, these folks working together with us at the city. I mean, we have kept, I think, a lot of businesses and a lot of employees employed and businesses open. There have been, unfortunately, those that have had to shut, but it's an extraordinary time, and we've done, I think, really bent over backwards to do what we can. So again, shout out to them.
So while we're on the subject of some of the larger developments, my next question actually ties into that. So there have been a lot of new residential units constructed in Evanston over the last few years, especially in some of these high rises that you had mentioned. And housing costs in Evanston continue to rise. Do you feel that the inclusionary housing ordinance is doing enough to combat this, or would you like to see some other solutions implemented?
Well, the short answer is no. I don't think it's doing enough, and I, you know, we really need to look at other ways to, you know, fund affordable housing. So, a couple of things. We've had the experience now with these residential buildings in the downtown, and for the most part, the units in these buildings are relatively small. So, a lot of studios and one bedrooms. These, even at 1571 Maple, which is right across from Benison's, I think there are unrented affordable units in there because they're just too small. They don't fit families' needs. So I really want to figure out a way that we can work with our housing partners and the city and the government and Housing Authority of Cook County to come up with some housing where we can really provide 3-bedroom units for families with kids. And I think that those should be in neighborhoods all throughout the city. And I have a lot of subsidized housing in my ward, and a real emphasis on affordable housing. So I know how valuable being in a neighborhood works for everybody, regardless of whether you're 100 or 1. It really is important to do. So that's what I want to do is expand our affordable housing. So we really are helping families that need it.
Thank you very much. So I just had one last question here that I had prepared before I move into the ones in chat, and it looks like we've gotten quite a few from our spectators. We had a question from a member who lives in the First Ward who wanted to know if there's anything that can be done to make parking easier in the First Ward, either reducing or eliminating parking fees, fines, or anything of that nature.
Okay, so again, during the budget discussions, one of the things that I was really concerned about, and again, this has to do with increasing revenues, and it's a very frustrating thing because I see opportunities to increase revenue, and so that we can lessen the burden on residents by imposing fines and fees. Fines and fees just don't promote a happy community. I mean, they again just add to the burden and exhaustion that people have. So looking for other ways again to regarding parking. We have, for example, snow parking. People were very unhappy that the snow parking ban signs are on the absolute extremes of every single block. On the larger block, we got some signs installed in the middle of it. And this is going to the city staff and saying, we need signs installed in the middle of the block so that people aren't getting tickets unnecessarily, because you can't expect people to walk down a block and read every single sign. I mean, that's just unfair. So that's one thing. I mean, snow parking, parking for street cleaning, for example. I mean, people get tickets for that, and I've gotten them myself and paid them, of course. But I mean, that it's just very hard for people to always remember. In the first ward, we have a lot of student parking on the street, and so we can always tell when the kids are back in town, because suddenly you can't find a place to park. And as a result of that, Parking District A may be the largest parking district in the city of Evanston, but it allows some relief for residents to be able to park on the street. Some of the larger buildings are now coming in with asking to decrease the parking spaces that are required by our zoning ordinance. And in areas where, that are very parked up, it would be hard to, decrease that in those areas, because getting cars off the street is really important. I mean, if I had my druthers, we wouldn't be parking on the street, but we do. And as a small business owner, I will tell you that as soon as the parking meter rates in Evanston would change, people would come in and complain. And every complaint was, I'm not going to shop in Evanston anymore. Now, I've talked about that at council. I'm one of 9 people. There are, again, if we don't increase revenues, that's why these things happen. So that's why I've been so focused on increasing revenues. But I hear you. I mean, absolutely, I hear you. So.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to try to get through as many of the questions from our audience as I can. So the first one comes to us, and it's regarding preservation, and they wanted to ask your voting record for years you're a proponent of preservation, but your voting record is much different, especially regarding the landmark Harley Clark. Since the referendum supported saving Harley Clark, will you support that and work with one of the independent RFPs that have been submitted and will revitalize the building for public use and at no cost to the taxpayers?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I need to clear this up, because I love Harley Clark. I mean, I took lots of classes over at the Art Center. I loved being in the building. I love buildings. That's absolutely where I'm coming from. So it's a little bit, I'm sorry if I've given the impression that I don't care about Harley Clark, because I really do. The problem with Harley Clark is that, I mean, it requires between $8 and $10 million of renovation, and who's going to have that? Now, we're hoping that at least some of the folks who have responded to the RFP do have that money, and I would be thrilled to see that. I am very concerned about an event space on the lakefront, because I'm, as part of my preservation efforts, have gone to maintaining a passive and natural lakefront. So I'm not sure. And again, because I have downtown and the Women's Club in the downtown, which is an event space, I know the pressures that an event space would, bring on the surrounding area. And so I just wouldn't support that at Harley Clark. But I'm really enthusiastic about some of the other choices that don't require a huge amount of traffic in and out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the next question it concerns a zoning variance for commercial use at the Northwestern's Welsh Ryan Stadium. So they ask, why didn't you support the 7th Ward Alderman and the local residents who were opposed to that zoning change? And then meanwhile, you pushed efforts to downzone part of the 1st Ward for drinking.
Oh, okay, that's a little bit, okay. So 7th Ward, again, increasing revenues. We've got to figure out a way to increase revenues. And that was an opportunity from Northwestern that would have increased revenues to the city. And this is where, you know, when you're on city council, you need to make a balance of decisions about what's the better decision, or the decision that will benefit Evanston residents who really need relief. I think that was where I was coming from on that, was the issue of revenue. The 1900 block of Orrington Avenue that I sought to downzone is a direct result of the influx of absentee landlords who are buying up houses. They have been buying them up in the Fireman's Park neighborhood for many years. Now they're moving into the 1st Ward. And these houses, once they buy a house and turn it over to student use, for the most part, even small houses are renting for $8,000 a month. Now, that is not affordable housing. That's not, I mean, I don't know anyone who, well, maybe there are people who could afford $8,000 a month for a small house in Evanston, but that's just doesn't fit in with any thoughts I have about where we should be going, especially with affordable housing in the community. But these houses, as we've seen in the 5th Ward in the Fireman's Park neighborhood, especially with alcohol-related parties and activities, can be extremely disruptive, and I can't tell you the number of times where our police forces had to go over and break up parties. And so the question is, what happens to a residential neighborhood then that is impacted by this? I mean, we don't want to see what has pretty much happened in the Fireman's Park neighborhood, which is people who are so frustrated, who are work 9 to 5, who have little kids, who, you know, have bought a house in what has traditionally been a really affordable neighborhood, and suddenly they can't get a good night's sleep. And they're dealing with, they're acting as in loco parentis to, you know, the college kids, and that just doesn't work to keep a neighborhood healthy. So we saw that starting in the 1900 block of Orrington Avenue. We knew that there were, at least of the 10 houses on that block, 2 had been purchased by absentee landlords. There were 2 more that were being eyed by the landlords. We didn't want to see that block fall. So after talking with the residents, and we decided that block actually should be zoned R1. I have no idea why it was ever zoned R4, but it should have been zoned R1 in the beginning. It's a natural part of the Northeast Evanston Historic District. It abuts R1, but it's just surrounded by Foster Walker and university uses on the east, and more intense R5 uses, apartment buildings and everything on the west. So in order to help preserve that block, again, as a residential block, that was the reason for downzoning that block, or requesting downzoning of the block, which did not pass council, by the way.
Okay, so we're starting to push against our time here. I'll try to get through a couple more of these pretty quickly. During the discussion to form an alternative to police program, you appeared resistant to reallocate funds from the police department in order to fund the pilot program. Can you speak more on your thoughts behind this?
Yeah, no, that's not true at all. I mean, I was always very much in favor of the alternative approach to policing. I actually think it'll help our police force. And I think it actually helps our police force to have the professional providers working with the police force. I think it, again, that helps us again be a more caring community, to have everybody working together. And I think our police would welcome that. And I've always supported that.
I think the question, though, specifically was in funding for it, whether that funding should come out of the existing police department budget versus getting its own budget.
Oh, you know what? I don't know what budget line that should come from, but I think that we're funding it. I think that's the important thing, is that we're taking steps to move forward.
So the next one's a quick one. They want to know if you'd be willing to hold meetings more frequently than on a quarterly basis.
Okay, so I do actually hold meetings more frequently on a quarterly basis. I have a lot of large apartment buildings in my ward and condo buildings in my ward, and not everybody can come out to the ward meetings, but they have issues. So I do mini ward meetings with them. So I'm doing ward meetings all the time. If any of my neighbors anywhere in the ward want to have a meeting, for the most part, I will be happy to do that. Regardless of what the issue is. I want to be very careful that everyone knows that I'm working very hard on the issues that are facing them, and that I will get staff out. On the 700 block of Lincoln is a good example of this, where we had problems with a couple of houses on that block that had turned over to student rentals, and we now have those at administrative adjudication for overcrowding and for lack of permits. So meeting with neighbors on issues is something that I do all the time. I'm always available by email, by phone, knock on my door. The quarterly ward meetings, though, are really helpful because there are so many people there, and because we need to be really cautious of staff time, because our staff now has been cut to a bare minimum. I think we are below the staff level that we need to be in order to really respond to constituent needs. And we could have monthly ward meetings, but we wouldn't I'm not sure we'd have the same information that we would have at our quarterly ward meetings. So our quarterly ward meetings, we always have a police report. We always have a downtown Evanston report, so we know what businesses are coming in, what businesses are going, what businesses are facing challenges, what the market is determining to attract new businesses and help retain businesses. So we do a lot of real important work. We could get together on a monthly basis and certainly talk, and I'd be happy to have, the police department there, or something else, but it wouldn't be, I think our regular ward meetings are actually pretty good. And I'm from everything that I've heard from everybody who attends, they wouldn't come to a monthly meeting. They think the quarterly board meetings are fine. So but I'm always available. So just let me know.
Okay, and I'll make this the final question. Guys, I want to thank you so much for submitting so many questions. I think at this point, you've actually asked more questions than I did, but we really have to wrap this up because I've got another one of these to do in just a minute here. But Trish asks, when was the last time the city had an outside audit of the budget?
Wow, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. So that would be something I would have to ask the city manager. Again, you have to give me just a tiny bit of room in my COVID brain to get that information, but I'd be happy to get the information to you. Now, if anybody else has questions and you want to send them to me in writing, I'd be happy to answer them. So I don't want anyone to leave feeling that their questions haven't been asked and answered.
So thank you so much, Judy, for coming to talk to us. And I'm really glad to hear that you're feeling better.
Thanks.
After having
Yep.
recovered from COVID.
Can I just remind everybody, if you have not signed up to get your the city request for information about vaccine, please do that. It's really important. And wear your mask. And if you see a student on the street in the first ward who isn't wearing a mask, please tell them to put it on, because they're doing a really good job of wearing masks. But this is not fun, and it hits everybody differently. So I liken it to somebody who's trying to get into your house and they're going to find a little way to get in and squeeze in there, a little mouse or something. This is more than a little mouse. This is a really big deal, and everybody needs to take it really seriously. So I'm thrilled that we have Zoom. I miss being with everybody in person. I am a natural hugger, so I love my ward meetings. I love talking to everybody. And so this is particularly hard for me. But again, I appreciate your good wishes. Thank you, Greg.
And thank you so much for joining us. So just a reminder, our endorsement ballots will go out on January 17th. That's tomorrow for everybody who's watching this live. And they are due back in by 8 p.m. on January 23rd. So thank you, Judy, for joining us.
Thank you.